What's up, football heads? Welcome back to that show. As always, I am your host, Kyle McQueen. We're back here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. Going to talk about this Packers Lions Thursday night football game. A little bonus episode here. Knock this out. One less thing to have to talk about on Monday's show because God knows whatever happens, I'm going to be ranting for about a half hour on whatever happened in the Vikings game. So, Packers Lions, huge matchup, probably the best Thursday night football game of the season, at least on paper, and the game itself certainly lived up to the hype. Obviously, huge implications for my Vikings. Came into the game rooting for the Packers because, that lets us catch the Lions. But then for me, anytime I watch a game, if I don't know who to root for, or maybe I come in rooting for one team, like my reactions to how the game is unfolding will inform who I'm actually rooting for. And I found myself rooting for the Lions. I don't know why. It's probably 2 decades of just complete hatred of the Packers and still not like the Lions haven't been great long enough to establish a foundation because to me, like, they've just been so bad for so long. Like, you never really give a shit about the Lions. Like, you want to beat the Bears, want to beat the Packers. Obviously, you want to beat the Lions, but like you're gonna beat the Lions, so it's not even worth stressing about. There's no hate there, and it's gradually building. But I found myself rooting against the Packers. Old habits die hard, all that shit. But great game, close game, defensive first half, offensive explosion in the second half. I feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds there a little bit. I mean, it was 17-7 at the half, not super low scoring, but for the Packers it was. But I got some interesting stats here compiled to kind of take a look at in terms of this game and see if we learned anything necessarily from this. Maybe we didn't, maybe we did. One thing I did notice in looking at the game charts that, the Lions come out, Packers win the toss, defer, Lions go right down the field, 76 yards in just over 5 minutes, get a touchdown. Green Bay punts, Detroit punts, Green Bay punts, Detroit punts. Green Bay fumbles to start the second quarter. Lions go down, they get a field goal. Well, they're kind of in field goal range. They get here 14 yards in 6 plays, get a field goal. Packers answer back, get a touchdown. As soon as they answer back, Detroit gets a touchdown. Then it's the end of the half. Green Bay comes out to start the third quarter. They get the touchdown back from deferring. Detroit throws an interception. The trend you can kind of see here in that Green Bay gets a touchdown in the first half. Detroit comes right back, gets a touchdown. Green Bay starts the third quarter with a touchdown. Lions throw the interception. Green Bay gets another touchdown. Now they're on top all of a sudden here. Not even 5 minutes into the third quarter. Game shifts completely. But Detroit answers right back. 70 yards, 15 plays, 6 minutes, 13 seconds. Get a touchdown to go back on top. Force a punt. Detroit turnover on downs. Go to the fourth quarter. Green Bay gets a touchdown. What happens? Detroit answers right back, gets a touchdown. Green Bay gets a field goal. Detroit goes right back down, answers with a field goal. So other than the one interception that Goff threw, every time Green Bay scored, Detroit matched it. And they got that touchdown in the beginning to kind of set it apart. And then they get the field goal to go up 10-0. And that's you look at Detroit, like we've seen them beat the dog shit out of a lot of teams this season because they're built that way. But with all the injuries on defense, I've talked about it. We talked about it on the pick show. I talked about it on Tuesday's show, maybe Monday's show, one of those shows. And I talked about it earlier in the week. You watch ESPN, it's all over there. I'm sure it's on Fox Sports, various YouTube programming. Everyone's talking about it. I'm not going to rehash the full list of names until we get to some new names added to the list. But all in all, the defense did a solid job, all things considered. Jordan Love, 12 for 20 for 206 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Third straight game with no interceptions for Jordan Love. So I feel like He's thrown a bunch, but 3 games in a row, no interceptions. You got to the further we get from the however many games it was, the first 10 games of the season, I think he threw an interception. So he's separating himself from that. So you kind of got to give, not give him credit, but kind of just like as it fades into the background, let it fade into the background. Like we know that Jordan Love will kind of throw some wonky balls every once in a while, but he's certainly in a groove right now. So you can't expect it. I'm sure he's going to throw another interception this season and or in the playoffs, but it's not this like given that it had been the first 2.5 months of the season. Josh Jacobs, 18 carries, 66 yards, only 3.67 average. Jordan Love scrambled 4 times for 23 yards. Emmanuel Wilson had 1 carry. Chris Brooks had 1 carry. So Christian Watson did have 4 catches for 114 yards, but he did also, where I have it here written down somewhere, he had the fumble in the first half when he was trying to get more yards, and he kind of like dove, and the guy hit the ball from behind that popped out. And then he had a big penalty on what would have been a Josh Jacobs touchdown, but still 4 catches, 114 yards. But nothing crazy. How many total yards is this? 206, 66, 272, 292, 295, just over 300. Yeah, not terrible. But you feel other than Christian Watson, nobody really went off. Jordan Love, again, 12 for 20, 206 yards. Josh Jacobs, 66 yards on the ground. Nothing crazy. It could have been a lot worse, especially considering all the injuries. One thing that I did find interesting is Green Bay had 20 pass plays, 20 rushes. So you know me, love that balance. 4 scrambles. So they only ran 44 plays in this game for a game that came down to the wire and 34-31. So in that regard, kind of a bit efficient in terms of the per play output. They averaged 7 yards per play. Detroit only averaged 5 yards per play. Detroit, though, 41 passes. So again, Green Bay only ran 44 plays. Detroit had 41 passes, 30 rushes. So more passes than rushes. And then they also have 4 scrambles. Detroit had the ball for 36 minutes, roughly just over 36 minutes. Green Bay just under 24 minutes. And going back to the 41 passes to 30 rushes for Detroit, not terrible. I mean, if you throw for 40 times and you also rush for 30, like you still ran the ball 30 times. So it's not like, we threw the ball 45 times and we only ran it 12 or something ridiculous like that. But it makes sense when you look at the Packers. Packers are 10th in rushing yards allowed, tied for 5th in yards per carry allowed. They're 21st in defensive rushing first down percentage, which will tie into the end of the game, which I'm 100% burying the lead and did not mean to. I had full plans coming here and talk about the lead as the lead, but we'll get to that at the end of the game. And then passing wise, they're 25th, Green Bay, their defense, in opponents' completion percentage, 17th in opponents' yards per attempt, 20th in passing touchdowns allowed, but they are tied for 7th in defensive interceptions. So plus Jair Alexander was out. Ballantyne was out, I believe. I always get it confused because there's Ballantyne and then Valentine. So yeah, Carrington Valentine had a pass deflection. So Ballantyne was out. So you're missing 2 corners, 2 DBs. Keyshawn Nixon, known more for his return prowess, played, but he had the interception. So good on him. Had a couple of pass deflections. But you just looking at these basic stats, it's not advanced analytics or anything. You would say it's easier to pass the ball in Green Bay than it is to run the ball, and ultimately Detroit passed the ball a little bit more. Montgomery 14 carries, 51 yards and a touchdown, 3.6 average. Jahmyr Gibbs 15 carries for 43 yards, 2.87 yards per carry. So. And then Goff, 32 for 41, 283, 3 touchdowns, and the 1 pick. spread the ball around. Jameson Williams, 5 catches, 80 yards. Laporta, 5 catches, 54 yards. Tim Patrick had a hell of a day. I'm sure someone out there had Tim Patrick. I think I saw a ticket online. It was like plus 6,000 for Tim Patrick to catch 2 touchdowns. And sure enough, he had 6 catches, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So whoever out there made that very ill-advised bet, congratulations on making however much money you made. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 5 catches for 43 yards. David Montgomery, 5 catches for 33 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 6 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different guys caught at least 5 passes. Nobody caught more than 6. So spread the ball around really well. It just shows how many weapons Detroit has. In some games, Amon-Ra St. Brown's drawing. We talked about this. I forget what game it was. Was it the Texans game, I think, where they struggled in the first half? And they were really just like doing everything they could to not let them get the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So then you might see a game where Jameson Williams has 100 yards or whatever, or Sam Laporta is up 80, 90 yards or something like that. Or a game where Amon-Ra St. Brown, where they play him straight up and he goes for 115 yards or something like that. But then you get a game like this where everyone gets involved. Nobody has a monster game, I guess, other than Tim Patrick with the 2 touchdowns, but you spread it around, everybody gets involved, everyone's kind of in the mix, and it just shows like they have so many weapons that they can take advantage of. And even if they got to go down the depth chart to Tim Patrick, like he's going to produce. So a lot more success through the air than on the ground, but they stayed committed to the ground game with the 30 carries to the 41 pass attempts. So, I mean, Green Bay was perfectly balanced. Detroit, not quite as perfectly balanced, but still running the ball, passing the ball, running more plays. Again, they ran 75 plays to 44 for Green Bay, had the ball for over 12 minutes longer than Green Bay did. But Green Bay, fairly efficient with the lack of plays. I think you want to run more plays. But if the choice is between running more plays and not being as efficient or running less plays and being more efficient, I don't know where. I guess it depends on the game flow, which you would prefer or who the opponent is maybe. Obviously, you want to run a ton of plays and be very efficient with it, but Green Bay still managed to be efficient. Jordan Love, again, 12 for 20, 206 yards, just the 1 touchdown. Obviously not his best game, but nothing catastrophic. It's not like he had a bad game. It just he didn't throw the ball that much. Green Bay converted 20% of their third downs, which, I mean, if you're not converting third downs, then you're not going to run a ton of plays. It just is the way it is. Even if you're a lot of quick strike offense or something like that, which wasn't the case here, though they have that potential with Christian Watson. Some of these other guys, I love Dontavion Wicks, but Detroit 46% on third down, so significantly better. And that, when you have a high third down percentage, do they show how many third downs they had? They do not. But I love the long, grinded out drives when you're running 12 plays, 15 plays, 17 plays. You're keeping the other team's defense on the field. If you're converting a lot of those third downs, the more you're converting them, the more you almost invite them because it's just an extra play. It's just extra. It provides that flow. Like quick strikes are nice, 80-yard bombs are nice, but they're sporadic. They're spurts. Whereas if you're just constantly first down, second down, third down, convert, first down, second down, third down, convert, you're in that flow. You're grinding the defense down, but your offense is in that rhythm. Like the quick shots, deep strikes, things like that, they're electrifying and they can provide like a jolt, give you some added juice, get the fans involved, things like that. But it doesn't really contribute to a flow necessarily. It doesn't contribute to being in a rhythm. Now, sometimes you get the games where, like the Vikings when they had Randy Moss, like the Thanksgiving game in his rookie season against the Cowboys or something like that, or like the current Dolphins when they have one of those games where they're going to put up 45 points or something like that, and they're just throwing the ball all over the field. Or the '07 Patriots, where like you're just you have those games where you have a high volume of those big plays, then you can get into a rhythm there, but that's very rare. It's easier to me, and it does more damage to the defense to just grind out these, not even necessarily slow, because at times it can feel like the clock is just flying off the board because it's just constantly running because you're just continuously moving the ball, even if it's 3 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, first down, that it just you're just constantly flowing. You're just in that rhythm. So I feel like the Lions had better rhythm in this game. 7 penalties each, so that was kind of a wash. I will say this for Jordan Love again: 12 for 20, 206 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. But in the second half, he was 9 for 13 for 175 yards and led 4 scoring drives in the second half. So definitely, again, first half 17-7. Green Bay came out super hot in the second half and got those quick 2 touchdowns. But Jordan Love, if he had played like he did in the second half in the full game, would have had much more of a monster game. So he looked fantastic in the second half. But yeah, Detroit, again, 34-31. Both these defenses kind of beat up. Obviously, Detroit significantly more beat up than Green Bay or literally any other team in the league right now. And then they lose Aleem McNeil, who was one of the people when I talked about it earlier in the week. I was like, their only 2 defensive tackles at the time that I was looking at it were Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader. DJ Reader did not play, and then Aleem McNeil went out in the first half with – he's listed as a head injury. On the broadcast, they said concussion, and he was ruled out. So I guess he went out. He went out with a concussion, but I guess he has a concussion. So you got to see how that is going to be moving forward. It's not like he tweaked something and they sat him out, but he can rehab it and be back for the next week. Like the concussions nowadays, like he might miss another game, might miss another 2 games. Who knows? And I guess Brian Branch went out at some point. I'm not 100% sure with what. I want to say a chest, but don't take my word for it because I'm kind of just pulling that out of my ass. But if you lose Aleem McNeil and Brian Branch, they got 18 players on IR. Pascal, Onwuzurike, DJ Reader were out. So it gets worse and worse and worse. And yet somehow the dirtiest player in the game, Kirby Joseph, somehow is still out there. And he was hunting for kneecaps yet again. It is what it is. But I don't know. The Lions right now, they got that sauce, dude. The Lions got that sauce, and Green Bay. I don't want to say Green Bay's too good of a team to be talking about. A moral victory or that. Well, we looked good. They looked better losing to the Lions than they did losing to the Lions in Green Bay. Where the score, what was it, 24-14? And there was a garbage time touchdown in there, I'm pretty sure. But like most of that game, it felt like the Lions were just beating the shit out of them, even if they weren't putting up a ton of points on the scoreboard. Again, first half fairly defensive, second half much more explosive offensively, which I think you would expect with the injuries on defense. But Green Bay I put into a category with like Minnesota, and Baltimore is another team that comes to mind where I feel like you can't put them in the tip-top echelon of the league with like Detroit, Philly. The Chiefs got to go in there because of Andy Reid and Mahomes. And like for as much as they flirt with disaster every week, they find a way to win every week, except against the Buffalo Bills. I think Buffalo is probably the most interesting of like – I think you got to put him in the tip-top echelon because the way Josh Allen's playing and the way I feel like the play calling, specifically on offense, is fantastic. They're running the ball more. Again, the quick strikes, letting guys do things on the ground and kind of grinding out longer drives than in the past few years where they're taking deep shots to Diggs taking deep shots to Gabe Davis, and I think that's it's allowing them to keep their defense, which is a little bit of it's the weaker of the two units on their team. With no disrespect to special teams, that is a unit. Shouts out to the special teams guys out there, but the way they're calling plays, it's very complimentary and understanding both the strengths and weaknesses of their teams. But the way Josh Allen's playing, I think you got to put them in the tip-top echelon. But there are questions about the defense that if Josh Allen wasn't the MVP right now, they would probably be in that Green Bay, Minnesota, Baltimore category. And then you got a bunch of other teams, who am I looking at here? Like the Chargers, what are the Commanders, teams like the Broncos, maybe the Bucks, the Falcons have probably played themselves a little lower to that. They're going to need to kind of the Falcons got to get off the schneid before I can put them back into this like next third tier category of teams where it's like there's stuff to like about them. Like you gotta love Baker's fire. You gotta love the way Bucky Irving's playing. If you're Tampa Bay, the way the Chargers defense is playing. The Commanders now that they come off the bye, I believe, or are they on? No, they're on a bye this week. Why did I think they were coming off a bye? But the Commanders, Jaden Daniels feels like he's healthy again. The defense is back. They get a big blowout win to bounce back from a losing streak. I don't know how to feel about the teams in the NFC West. They're almost their own tier at this point, but other than the Niners, who are just beat to shit and falling apart. But I feel like Green Bay, Minnesota, Baltimore are teams that you feel like they could beat any given team on any given day. Doesn't mean they will. Like Green Bay lost to Detroit twice. Minnesota lost to Detroit. But Green Bay lost to Philly. But in watching the games, you come away thinking like they can beat that team. They might not have beat that team. They might play them in the playoffs and lose again, but they are capable of beating that team when the chips are down in the playoffs. Even if they don't, they're capable of it. But like that next tier, like, do I have confidence that the Chargers or the Commanders or the Bucks are going to go into Buffalo, go into Kansas City, go into Philly, go into Detroit in the playoffs and get a win? I don't. I like when the chips are down. Like I don't see it happening. Whereas I could see Green Bay upsetting Detroit or Philly in the playoffs. I could see Minnesota upsetting one of those teams. I could see Baltimore. Baltimore already beat Buffalo this season. I could see Baltimore going into Kansas City and getting a win. So Green Bay, they fall to 9-4. They're still pretty firmly in position here, in the last month of the season. 4 games left. I'm trying to pull up the standings here. Actually, I guess probably be smarter to pull up the playoff picture. But, they're still in a good spot when you think about the NFC. That once you get past the teams that are currently in the playoffs or in the wild card with Vikings, Packers, Commanders at 10-2, 9-4, and 8-5. You get to the Bucks. Like the Bucks, I think are going to win the division. I think there's only going to be one team in the South represented. The Cardinals at 6-6, the Rams at 6-6, 49ers and Cowboys at 5-7. So I think even you pick up a fourth loss here as the Packers, but win-wise, you're 3 wins ahead of the Bucks, the Cardinals, the Rams, with, for you, 4 games to go. For them, 5 games to go. But like it would require a pretty colossal collapse here for the Packers to fall out of the playoffs at this point. Who have the Packers? Okay, they have not played. I'm curious about the tiebreaker situation with the Commanders, because the Packers, they're at Seattle next week, which will be interesting. Seattle is going to be a major player here because they got the Packers next week, and then they got the Vikings hosting both of them the week after that. Then the Packers host the Saints at Minnesota, host the Bears. So the way the Packers are playing right now, like Monday Night Football against the Saints, should win that game. Chicago, it's tough because, again, like their roster is super talented. They just haven't figured it out, and we haven't seen them now with – I kept calling him Thomas More because I was thinking of the longtime assistant Tom Moore. And now I forgot what his name actually is. Thomas something is the Bears interim coach. Hold on, I have to look this up because I can't keep coming on here and acting like I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Thomas Brown. So, but again, this is the same situation. I talked about this on the Pick Show with Caesar with the Jets. They fire Bob Saleh, but now Coach Brick is calling plays defensively for the first time, and now he's also the coach of the team. So you go from being a coordinator, but you're not the play caller, to calling the plays and coaching the team, doing double duty, taking a step up in your initial duty and then adding a second, even bigger, more important duty on top of that. And we see how that's gone with the Jets. Jets, another super talented team. So could that be the case here for the Bears, where it's too overwhelming for the guy? Because again, like every once in a while you see an interim coach come in and like give the team a little bit of juice. But usually it's a special teams coordinator because it's a guy who he's only coordinating for a fraction of the plays per game that the OC and the DC are. So like they're the logical choice to take on that second role and have all those added responsibilities while also being someone who, being special teams, you're dealing with offensive players and defensive players, the depth of the roster that's making up the special teams unit. So you kind of have foundations within both the offense and defense. You have a foundational relationship with a large percentage of the team that make up the special teams. So I don't know how often you see that juice in a team that fires its coach in a situation where it's an OC or a DC, especially if that guy wasn't calling plays. Like if your coach is a defensive coach, he was calling the defense, and then you install the OC who was calling plays as the head coach, then you're kind of in a situation where they're adding responsibility, a bigger responsibility, but at the same time, like they've already been calling the plays versus adding two new layers. So I'm curious to see how it goes for the Bears because they are very talented. There's no way around. Like people thought the Vikings were going to be the worst team in the division, and were debating whether the Packers or Bears would be who's going to be the second and third behind Detroit. It's like we know they got talent. So let's see if you get Waldron out of there, Thomas Brown steps in, you get Eberflus out of there because you had to get him out of there because the dude was a buffoon, and now Thomas Brown has to step up and do that as well. So we'll see how he does. This weekend, they're at San Francisco, which on paper, much tougher game than it should be because like I believe both Caesar and I were on the Bears. I know I'm on the Bears. I feel like a lot of people are on the Bears because there's just too many injuries for San Francisco. So this might be a good opportunity for the Bears to get back in the win column after 6 straight losses. Right, they're 4-8. They were 4-2. But Green Bay here, Green Bay's going to win at least 11 games, which there was a while where I was like, I don't know, a team might win 11 games and not make the playoffs. But the middle of the NFC, the mid of the NFC kind of have taken themselves out of contention for that. So Green Bay, I think, is safe. It's just, what are the Commanders going to do? Can the Commanders jump Green Bay? Now I'm curious about the conference records for the two of them. Let's pull that up here real quick and see. Green Bay is 4-4 in conference. The Commanders are 5-3. And if we look at the Commanders' schedule, the Commanders are at the Saints next weekend. They're on bye this weekend, but at the Saints, host the Eagles, host the Falcons, at the Cowboys. So all conference games here. Going to be favored in 3 of the 4. which would get them to 11-5 if they go chalk. They lose to the Eagles, which the Eagles are a better team, more experienced. They've been there. They've been most of this team, or at least a lot of the team has been to the Super Bowl. The coach has been to the Super Bowl. Quarterback's been to the Super Bowl. Receiver's been to the Super Bowl. Obviously, Saquon's not, but Saquon is Saquon. So, like, whatever. He's going to run roughshod over everybody. So if they lose that, beat the Saints, beat the Falcons, beat the Cowboys, they're an 11-win team. If Green Bay only beats the Saints and the Bears, and they're at 11-5, Commanders will jump them. So I think if you're Green Bay, you gotta win either this game at Seattle or the game at Minnesota, and see if that can jump you up. Because I think I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Packers fan about how, like, do you want the 5 seed? Do you want the 6 seed? For those two teams, I don't think it really matters necessarily. Like they both Green Bay and Minnesota should be able to go into whoever wins the South or whoever wins the West in their building in the first round and come out with a win because they're just slightly better than all of those teams. At the very least, they're playing that way. So I think as long as you got the 5 or 6 seed, if you're Green Bay and Minnesota, I think you feel good. You do not want the 7 seed because the 7 seed as it is right now, you're going into Philly. You don't want to go into Philly. And if something gets wonky there, if Detroit falls to Buffalo and how that I think Philly needs Detroit to trip up twice. Let me pull up the ESPN NFL playoff machine and we will plug in something real quick and see how that looks. But either way, if you're the 7 seed, you're probably high probability you're going to Philadelphia or Detroit. And hold on, let me see how this shakes out. If Philly wins, Detroit loses next week, and then Detroit, Philly. I apologize for the podcast listeners. I guess even visually it's not that interesting, but at least you can see me staring intently at the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Yes, if as it is now, if Detroit loses one more game, Philly wins out, Detroit will still be the 1 seed. But even if that's not the case, if you're the 7 seed, you're going to Detroit, you're going to Philly, you don't want to go there. You would much rather be going to Atlanta, going to Tampa Bay. And I'd rather go to Atlanta than Tampa Bay, to be honest, or going to Arizona, going to Seattle, going to the Rams. Much rather go there than have to go to Philly or Detroit at this point. So I think Green Bay, they want to get to 12 wins because I think Washington – with that, a big bounce back last week, beat the dog shit out of the Titans, I believe. If they get back on that roll, their schedule's set up for them to win 11 games, and right now that's going to be an issue for them, for Green Bay with that conference record because again they're 4-4 in the conference. Washington's 5-3. If Green Bay loses 2 of the remaining games, they're going to be 6-6 in the conference. Washington will be 8-4, I believe, if they both finish with 11 wins at this point. So yeah, that's going to be tough. And then Minnesota's sitting there at 5-2 in the conference, and so if they fall to 11 and that's the old rules. 11-6. That would put them at 6-5. Right? 6-5. No, that doesn't make sense. 6-6 in the conference. So then it would come down to if all 3 of those teams win 11 games, it's going to get interesting. Minnesota at 10-2, they put themselves in a great position. They should win at least 12 games. When you look at their remaining schedule, they have Atlanta at home this week. They get Chicago at home on Monday night next week. Then they're at Seattle, host Green Bay, and at Detroit. So those last 3 games, pretty tough. But if they can get these next 2 or get one of the next 2 and then get that Seattle game, or, if you could beat anytime we play the Packers, in my mind, it's like, let's split. Never in my mind, I'm like, we're going to sweep Green Bay. I don't even know how many times that's happened in my lifetime, but obviously I'd love to sweep Green Bay and split with Detroit and sweep Chicago. But I think if you're the Vikings, if you could win this week, win next week, beat Seattle, then like you're at that point, you're pretty much locked into the 5 seed. Unless Detroit slips up, and then there's no downward momentum at that point. If they win they should be favored in these next 3 games. They should win these next 3 games. They're at 13-2. You got the 2 tough games at the end of the schedule, but at that point, the worst you can be is 13-4, and I believe that would guarantee them the 5 seed, even if Green Bay goes 13-4, because the best Green Bay can do is go 13-4. So then that Green Bay at Minnesota game is not consequential from a negative standpoint. It's just consequential on, can you still catch Detroit at that point? But I don't know. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I don't know. Did we learn anything on this Thursday night? We knew Detroit was beat up. We knew that their defense was probably going to struggle a little bit with an offense that can move the ball like Green Bay can and put up points like they can. They put up points, but Detroit found a way to win. We know they can find ways to win. We know Green Bay is capable of competing with a team like Detroit, which they did. And it came down to the end of that game, which, like I said, I buried the lead. And here we go. I woke up today and I go on Instagram, scrolling Instagram, and all the memes are about how, Dan Campbell, the ball's on Dan Campbell playing Madden in real life, Dan Campbell doing things in real life that I wouldn't even do in Madden, because at the end of the game, they're around the 20, 21-yard line, I believe, 4th and 1. It's tied at 31, 43 seconds left. You're in relatively chip shot field goal range for Jake Bates. You kick it, you go up 3, then you just got to play some defense and prevent the Packers, number one, prevent them from going down, scoring a touchdown and winning the game in, 40-ish seconds, 43 seconds. And ideally keep them out of field goal range so you don't go to overtime. So Dan Campbell decides, fuck it, it's 4th and 1, we're going to run the ball. And again, Green Bay, their run defense, much better than their pass defense, at least on the basic stats. And Detroit had been having more success through the air than on the ground during the course of the game. But it's Detroit. You got one of the best offensive lines in football. You got the best running back duo in football. When the chips are down, it comes down to, who do I do I trust my offense behind that offensive line with those 2 running backs to get 1 yard? Or do I trust my beat to shit defense, 18 players on IR, plus you're down Pascal, plus you're down Onwuzurike, plus you're down DJ Reader, plus Aleem McNeil goes down, plus Brian Branch goes down? I think if you weigh it out defensively, either way, if you don't get it, they're around the 20-yard line. You got to stop them from getting in the field goal range. If you do get it, or if you kick the field goal, you still got to stop them from going down, getting in the field goal range again to lose the game or send the game into overtime. So there is that distinction. But on a kickoff, if you kick it into the end zone, they're going to be at the 30. Versus if you don't get this, they're going to be 20, 21-yard line. So you're getting an extra 10-yard cushion for your defense if you don't get this. If you do get it, the game's over. You're going to kick the field. You're going to run the clock down, call a timeout, kick the field goal. Game's over. So to me, the reward significantly outweighs the risk in this point. Because either way, if you don't chase the reward, or if you do chase the reward and you get burned, either way, your defense has to stop them from getting down into field goal range. So that outcome is the same. Now, the difference in the two outcomes is, again, sending it to OT versus losing the game. But either way, there's a stretch of field to get there. If you go for it and don't get it, you get about an extra 10 yards to pad how far they got to go in 40 seconds to get into field goal range. And on the flip side, if you get it, you win. The reward is just significant. Like, I don't think this was a crazy ballsy move. Like, Dan Campbell will do some crazy ballsy shit. Dan Campbell will do some heavily ill-advised shit. Dan Campbell will look at a risk reward and say, well, the risk is about twice as much as the reward, but fuck it. I'm feeling it. I'm in the flow. We're going for it. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Has not burned them thus far, not this season at least. But he'll do some crazy shit. This was not crazy. This was the right move. With that offensive line, with those running backs, weighing out the risk reward, 4th and 1. Now, guys, I think an offensive lineman stepped on Goff's foot and he's going down and like still delivers a perfect handoff somehow. And watch, I was just shaking my head as it happened. Like, as a Packers fan, it's got to be heartbreaking to watch because you see him go down and you're like, but then it just ball right into the guy's gut. Like, if that goes another way and that ball flies out and a guy scoops that up, runs it back for a touchdown, now all of a sudden Green Bay's up 7 and now Detroit has, 30 seconds left to go the full length of the field to get a touchdown. Like, that could have gone horribly wrong. Or Goff just falls down and gets touched and he's down and they turn it over on downs and now it's a tie game and Green Bay's got to go, 40 yards in 37 seconds, 38 seconds to kick a field goal and win the game. So could have been a disaster, was not a disaster. They get the first down with relative ease. Again, one of the best offensive lines in football, best running back duo in the game. So I don't know. I don't think it was there's always a risk involved, but I don't think it was this like crazy ballsy decision. It requires balls in the sense of like you got to have conviction to make the decision in the moment and not be waffling and not be frozen by the analysis of what you should do there. But like seeing all the memes, it was like, I don't know, like motherfuckers in Madden will go for it on 4th and 15 from their own 20-yard line. Like this is light work compared to some of the crazy stupid shit that we would all do on Madden when we were young. Some of us still do now, but I don't know. It didn't strike me as this crazy ballsy move. I just looked at it as this is 100% the right call. It's not even a question to me. So I don't know. Like I said, I buried the lead, but this is a case where I don't know. I think it was much ado about nothing, personally. What else do I want to do here? I might go through this injury report if I can find what I'm looking for here. Okay, the Jets. C.J. Mosley is out. Breece Hall is out, or doubtful. Sauce Gardner. Doubtful. Breece Hall, doubtful. Questionable. Olufashano, Morgan Moses, Xavier Newman-Johnson, Elijah Vera Tucker, and Quantez Stiggers. Dolphins, Raheem Mostert, questionable. Teron Armstead, questionable. Bradley Chubb, questionable. Cameron Good, Anthony Walker, Kader Kohu, Blake Ferguson, all questionable. Falcons, Jace McClellan is out. Rook Ororo is questionable. Mike Hughes, in his big triumphant return to Minnesota, has been playing pretty solid ball for the Falcons. He's questionable. Steph Gilmore is out with the hamstring. Dalton Reisner questionable with a back. Harrison Phillips questionable with a back. Patrick Jones II questionable with a knee. Van Ginkel questionable with a thigh. And then Will Reichard and Andrew DePaula, kicker and long snapper, questionable with a quad and a hand. I imagine they're probably still going to roll with McQuaid and Parker Romo. So, I mean, if you're the Vikings, Reisner you could deal with because you got Ed Ingram, but Harrison Phillips, Andrew Van Ginkel for sure need those guys in the lineup. And Pat Jones II has had a monster season here in a contract year, so I want to see him on the field. For the Saints, Bub Means is out. Taysom Hill is obviously out. He shredded his knee up. Nick Saldivari is out. Kendre Miller, questionable. And I am not even going to attempt to pronounce this name. He is questionable with an Achilles. For the Giants, Rakeem Nunez Roches, out. Bobby Okereke, out. Deontay Banks, out. Jermaine Illuminor, doubtful. DJ Davidson, doubtful. Malik Neighbors, Chris Hubbard, Evan Neal, Jordan Riley, Deontay Johnson, and Andrew Phillips are all questionable. Panthers, Jalen Coker, doubtful. Jatavion Sanders, Robert Hunt, Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wanham, Josie Jewell, Caleb Farley, and Nick Scott are questionable. The Eagles, a lot of injuries here. These are all out. Britton Covey, Dallas Goedert, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown. For the Browns, Cedric Tillman's out with a concussion. Jedrick Wills out with a knee. Sam Kamara is out with a concussion. And Maurice Hurst out with an ankle. Jamari Thrash, Miles Harden, Juan Thornhill, questionable. Steelers, Montravius Adams is out with a knee. George Pickens, questionable with a hamstring. For the Raiders, Zamir White is out. Nate Hobbs is out. Justin Shorter, doubtful with a back. Questionable, Alex Madison and Jacoby Myers. For the Bucks, Marquise Watts, KJ Britt, Troy Hill, and Mike Edwards are all out. Questionable, Bucky Irving, my boy. Trey Palmer, Joe Tryon, Shoyinka, J.J. Russell, Josh Hayes, and Tyke Smith, all questionable. Jags, Yasir Abdullah, Tyson Campbell, Logan Cook, Ross Matasic, out or questionable, Trevor Lawrence obviously out. He was put on IR. For the Titans, Jalen Duncan, Logan Brusser out. Leroy Watson, my boy, Tavondre Sweat, Jerome Baker, Kenneth Murray, James Williams, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., also my boy, and Roger McCreary, all questionable. For Seattle, Stone Forsythe out. Kenneth Walker III and Michael Dixon are questionable. Elijah Jones is out for the Cardinals. Naquan Jones and Dante Stills, are questionable. The Bills, Keon Coleman, questionable with the wrist. Dalton Kincaid, questionable with the knee. Quentin Morris, Tylen Grabble, and Dwayne Carter, and a rookie. I don't know how he's doing, but I did like him coming out of the draft. They are all questionable. For the Rams, Tyler Higbee's out with a knee. KT Leviston is out with an ankle. Jared Verse, front runner right now for Defensive Rookie of the Year, is questionable. For the Bears, Roshan Johnson out with a concussion. Ryan Bates also out with a concussion. Elijah Hicks is out with an ankle. DeAndre Swift, questionable with a quad. DJ Moore also questionable with a quad. The Chiefs, only one injury, questionable. Mecole Hardman with a knee. And no injury report for the LA Chargers. So shouts out to them. No injury report for Monday night, Bengals and Cowboys. Maybe that'll come out later. I'm not 100% sure. But there is your injury report roundup for this weekend's games. Hope you enjoyed the Thursday night breakdown. We'll be back probably most likely Monday. Maybe there'll be a reason for me to do an episode tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe we'll go live on Sunday. Who knows? No promises. But until next time, whether it's Monday, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's Sunday, whatever the case may be, until next time, as always, like, subscribe, follow on Instagram at Footballheads Show with 2 S's at Footballheads Show on Instagram. And always take it easy, Footballheads.